From the magic within our hearts to the adventure beyond the horizon, there is only one Disney. Nope, not that version of Pocahontas. Today we're going to be talking about the actual real-life Pocahontas.
As influential as she is, her true perspective or point of view was never revealed. She never wrote down her feelings or wrote a book about what she went through. The icon's life story has always been told on someone else's accounts. Her name is widely known and often talked about, but the countless trouble she faced, not as much. Pocahontas was a Native American woman born around the year of 1595. Yet before being nicknamed Pocahontas, she was originally named Amanute, and later often went by the name of Matoaka. It was actually a Native American tradition to change names as you grow up, because your personality will differ and it will develop. It wasn't until later when she earned the nickname Pocahontas for her playful nature. Being the young girl she was often found doing cartwheels or running around in the forest. She had a bright and high-spirited personality, so during a coming-of-age ceremony, she officially changed her name to the one we know most today, Pocahontas. She was the daughter of a tribal nation ruler named Wahensicat, and also known as Chief Powhatan, and it is believed that the mother had passed away while giving birth. Chief Powhatan was in charge of the 30 tribes of the Powhatan chieftain. Her hometown, San Comico, resided in the Chesapeake Bay region, which lays right on the coast of Virginia.
In order to understand where Pocahontas' historic importance roots come from, you need to know of her involvement with the Jamestown colony. During the year of 1607, some British explorers sailed out to the New World and arrived in Jamestown, Virginia, which was somewhere near the Native American lands. One of these English men included a man named John Smith, and he would later be considered a Jamestown leader. This same man will turn out to publish a book where he shares details about his adventures, though many historians will say that plenty of his writings were probably false. But during this portion of her story, we really only know of John Smith's point of view. At one point, John was apparently being held captive by the Powhatans. He wrote that he was wandering a bit farther from his colony, where he was forcibly taken to the natives' land. He claims there had been 2 big rocks that were placed down on the ground, and his head was soon to be forced down to clash with the stones. But then, as if it was fate, Pocahontas was there to save him, protecting him from her very own father. He went as far as saying that she had actually placed her own head upon his as a sign of rebellion. There's only the theory that his life was never actually in danger. It could also have been some kind of welcoming or adoption ceremony. It should also be taken into account that Smith often changed his stories later on and probably dramatized some of his experiences as well. But after both sides came to some kind of understanding, John Smith was released.
Still, the colonists were never very respectful to the native tribes. There would be some cases where Powhatan women and children got kidnapped by Englishmen and would be violated. Assault was taken very seriously by the Powhatans, and it meant immediate death for the perpetrator. So, this sent the tribes into a mess of confusion, seeing that the British for some reason found it normal and okay to do so. And it's more upsetting to know that the colonists saw the Native Americans as something that wasn't human. They were very degrading towards them. Soon, confusion turned into anger, so thus, the First Anglo-Powhatan War came to be in 1609.
Sometime during that same year, Pocahontas turned 14, which was considered a marriageable age. From here on out, she would be dealing with adulthood. Pocahontas married a man named Cocoon in 1610. He was what they called a private captain, and some people will say that Pocahontas probably married him for love, since he was not considered to be one of high status. Then, another Englishman decided to involve himself with Pocahontas. His name was Captain Samuel Agrell, and he found out where the chief's favorite daughter had been staying. He claimed that he kidnapped Pocahontas for some ransom because allegedly her father had stolen their firearms, and he also asked that the Native Americans return the Englishmen they were holding captive. He had strategically planned her kidnapping, so Pocahontas was actually staying in Patawomic, which was the tribe her husband was from. Agrell decided to ask the Patawomic chief's brother to assist him with the abduction. The man that decided to scheme against the Powhatans was Chief Japasaw. They unfortunately succeeded in kidnapping Pocahontas when she was convinced to accompany Chief Japasaw and his wife to check out Captain Agrell's ship. The wife pretended to want to go aboard, but the tribal chief would only allow it if Pocahontas were to go along with her. Pocahontas may have known something was wrong, but stopped hesitating when Japasaw's wife broke out into tears. And so capturing her had become official, since after eating on the boat, she had to stay the night, and then she would not be released from Agrell's hold the next day either. Meanwhile, Chief Powhatan was then alerted of his daughter's capture and immediately became open to negotiations. Now, according to the Native Americans' oral history, once Kokum heard of his wife's abduction, he marched to Jamestown immediately, shooting bows and arrows everywhere. But before he could have saved her, the private captain was gunned down. Struggle after struggle, Pocahontas ended up falling into depression. The colonists noticed how she stopped eating and knew that they had to prioritize her health so she could stay alive. Because of this, they allowed her sister to pay a visit. When the two sisters spoke, Pocahontas revealed that she was continuously being sexually assaulted by the crew members that stayed in the same ship she was now being kept in. She was desperately trying to return home, but of course, the Englishmen refused.
Her life takes another turn when she's being imprisoned but turns up pregnant with one of her assaulters. There was no hiding now. They couldn't hide her pregnancy nor the fact that she was being violated by the English. Instead, they turned their focus onto trying to cover up their wrongdoings.
Now another English settler named John becomes involved. This time it was John Rolfe.
He was known for being the first to introduce tobacco planting to Jamestown. Rolfe of course knew about Pocahontas already, and he may have even been a rapist of hers. He was a widower and in his 40s when his marriage to Pocahontas was arranged. Before getting married though, Pocahontas had to be baptized in a Christian church at the age of 17 or 18 since it was against the rules for an English person to marry a Native American. This wasn't allowed solely because the English did not see any Native American as human. Her baptism would be the only way that they would consider her having some kind of human soul in her. Also during this transition, she had to change her name to Rebecca. Soon after making their marriage official, colonists claimed the two individuals actually fell in love with each other. So with this, Chief Powhatan then negotiated a peace treaty, thinking that his daughter was genuinely safe and happy. The treaty was called the Peace of Pocahontas, and for the next following years, Jamestown and the Powhatan tribe remained on civil terms. After that agreement had been established, it was expected that Pocahontas would have at least been allowed to see her family again. Sadly, it never happened. Despite how the two parties were no longer at war with each other, Pocahontas wasn't able to see her father or siblings ever again.
Later, she was forced to move to England with her husband John Rolfe. After their arrival, the English seemed to have been in awe of their love story. But did John Rolfe even love Pocahontas? There are historic accounts of Rolfe being interviewed once, and he said something like if he really wanted to take advantage of a teenager, he would have rather chosen someone more pleasing to the eye. The child Pocahontas later gave birth to in England was of course claimed to be Rolfe's. Pocahontas' son was named Thomas Rolfe, who was baptized in Christianity as well. Pocahontas went from wearing tribal clothes to traditional European clothing. Even her hair and manners went through a whole new transformation. Pocahontas was also very kind towards the English, and she eventually met Queen Anne and King James. She left a lasting impression on the two royals as their perception of Native Americans was suddenly altered. They changed their mind and realized that natives were actually humans. Then there was a moment where John Smith actually met Pocahontas again in England. Their encounter did not go well because Pocahontas took this time to confront Smith about his wrongdoings. She found out about his best-selling book, which was practically fiction. He used her tribe's name in a more condescending way while portraying Pocahontas as the only one that maybe had some hope of having a soul. His lies had offended and angered Pocahontas greatly.
It was during the year of 1617 when an arrangement was finally made for Pocahontas to return to Virginia. She had most likely convinced Rolfe to allow her to visit. And so John, Pocahontas, and their 2-year-old son boarded a ship heading back to her homeland. This was a very fateful day as Pocahontas ended up passing away on the boat. She must have contracted some illness during the trip because she was in a healthy state prior to sailing. 20 years old, her body was eventually buried in Gravesend, England.
It is very unfortunate that whatever she may have felt during these times never actually came from her. Rather, it came from different historical accounts and writings. Still, Pocahontas shall be remembered for the courageous, brave woman she was and how she left a lasting impact on colonial America. She brought peace and harmony to her tribe, and she defeated the stereotypes that English settlers had placed upon her and her people. This was the story of Pocahontas.